Does the church have a natural life cycle? And I think that's the first time I'd heard that put that way. What was
Mhm.
behind your question, and what would you say to people? Because I've people respond to this in very visceral ways. But what was your reason for asking such a question, and why do you think people need to think through that now?
Yeah, well, sure. As a student, I studied a lot of church growth and church health, and then I taught for a bit, a decade or so, and taught in that field, and then worked for, gosh, almost 2 decades as a consultant with churches in the denomination that you guys are part of. And I just witnessed it. I saw it over and over again. Churches that would be born and that would grow and that would make a dynamic impression in the community where they were planted, and then something would happen. Some things would happen, really, and over the course of time, they'd plateau and then they begin to decline. And that drove me to study more and read more. And I became convinced that was the case. I had been a part of a couple of house church networks earlier in my life. And so I was drawn to the organic model of church anyway. And so I began to think about, well, churches are organic. Churches is not the same as the church, right? A church and the church are not the same thing. And so you could see them. You could see them be born, or you could read about their birth and their history, and you could see all of these different stages. And I began to wonder, what is it that's causing this to play out the way it plays out? Because it seems almost natural. Not that there's not a supernatural potential to do something different, but it's almost natural to see it happen. The church starts with a dream. The people who form the core or the planter or whoever it is that's part of establishing the church, they have this dream that they are persuaded comes from God. And I'm convinced that more times than not it does. So they begin to set out. They articulate the stream as a mission statement of some kind. They set out on a mission, whether they write it down or not. They set out on it in their local community. They build systems and structures that help them to flesh out that dream becoming a reality in the life of the church. But there's this place at the top of the bell curve, if you think of it that way. There's this place at the top of the bell curve where all of a sudden the attention is no longer on the God who gave the dream, but the attention is on the systems and the structures that have been created to facilitate the dream. They start tweaking those things over and over and over again. They're just changing this a little bit, changing that a little bit. And the whole conversation, if you sit around a table with the leadership, the whole conversation is about their systems and their structures. And, I'm enough of a student of the scripture like you that I know God does not like it when we're taking something else and putting it in the place of God. There's a little bit of idolatry that starts to take place. It's unintentional idolatry in the life of the churches that I've been a part of and worked with, but it happens nonetheless. That's what they're looking for to be their answer, their hope, that sort of thing. And so plateau
Mhm.
sets in. Uh, there is um, there is no clear vision anymore, and so people cast off restraints. The proverbs say, right? They start pulling against each other and going in different directions, and no, this is the way I've always done it and this is what we want done. And that kind of back and forth tug of war starts to take place in the life of a church. And they their view of the mission, their view of the field where they're serving is almost completely lost. And so the result of that, not the curse that God places on them, but just the result of the fact that they're no longer looking at their mission field the way God's looking at their mission field, is the numbers begin to decline. People get unhappy because they don't get their way, and they leave and go to no church or some other church. And little by little, these things start to decline. And if a church lets the slide go too far down that side of the hill, um, it's death is going to come knocking. There's no question about it. They may be on life support for a generation or two, which is not doing the kingdom any good, but it is what it is. And they just kind of hang in there until there's six left or four left, and they can no longer pay the bills, and they have to finally close down then. But our dream, when you and I were talking to each other, was that somewhere up here at the top, at the plateau, when you recognize that we've taken our eyes off of the one who gave the dream to start with, that there it's possible to, as Bob Dale wrote years ago, to dream again. It's possible
Yeah.
to position ourselves with God, who still cares deeply for the people who are our mission field, and wants desperately for us to be his church, that we can begin to dream again and see a new bell curve a
Yeah.
new generation start. And that